All right, good afternoon, welcome. A little bit of a slimmer crowd than normal, but it's good to see everyone. Start the meeting, and also the time is only 3. And so do the roll call, please.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
And we need to bring someone in from the.
From the waiting room?
No, I think there's a vote.
Yeah, there are some, we'll do the roll call first and then we'll go through who's online and then the bit for you all and vote whether or not you want to allow them to participate fully while you're over it. Supervisor Malik? Yes. Supervisor Galloway? Councilor Snook? Councilor Kingston?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Ms. Laundrie? Mr. Reed?
Here.
Present online. Mr. Williams?
Here.
Ms. Monteith? Yes. Ms. Dubinsky?
Here.
And just as a note that Wood Hudson is no longer a representative of the RPT, has taken another position with VDOT in their trails department. So Tiffany Dubinsky is going to be filling in for the time being from DRPT. Thank you for being here today, Tiffany. Mr. Minor?
Here.
Mr. Koenig? Mr. Condor?
Here.
And Ms. Jacobs? Here.
So 3 of 6 counts as a quorum.
The 3 of them. Ms. Laundrie is an alternate.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No problem.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess the first order of business is, are there any members of the public who would like to provide comments? There's a limit of 3 minutes per speaker, and Ms. Shackelford will be keeping time. Anyone present? Okay, I guess we'll look to see if there's anyone online. Okay. So I think the time for public comment, the public is complete. So we need to have a review and acceptance of the agenda. Does anyone have anything they want to add to the agenda? Okay, could I have a motion, please, to approve about the agenda? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll?
No.
I do. Okay, all right, so we're in agreement.
You can have all of it.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Motion is by the vote. Approval of January 25th, 2023 meeting minutes. Are there any revisions that are needed to the meeting minutes presented? Okay, can I have a motion to adopt the meeting minutes for the January 25th meeting? All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Ready. So I guess the next item of business is for Mr. Nichols to present to us on the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee appointment. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's me. Likewise. Good afternoon, Ryan Wiggins. The Citizen Transportation Advisory Committee has several term expirations. The City Council appointed 3 members at their last meeting, 2 reappointments and 1 meeting. At this meeting, the MPO policy board will be appointing or considering the appointment of representative of CTAC, the MPO representative. In your packet, there was an application from Mr. Chapman. If you all feel so, then you can go to.
Okay, so the ones that the city appointed last night, it's separate from this. So CTAC is part of the MPO,
Subcommittee.
a subcommittee, and so the city appoints. Well, you know, we appoint people here, and then we all do that as well. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So I read Mr. Munden's application, it seemed excellent. Do we have any questions? Okay.
I have no question. I move that we appoint him if there's no further discussion.
All in favor? So, Mr. Munden, we appreciate him being willing to serve. That's great. Okay, next item, I guess you can stay here. The FY 24 to 27 transportation improvement program.
I will get us started and then I'll hand it over to Ryan. I think most of you all are probably pretty familiar with the TIP process by this point, but TIP stands for Transportation Improvement Program, and this is one of those required documents that MPOs need to prepare in order to program spending of federal transportation funds within the MPO region. It is a 4-year spending program that is updated every 3 years, basically. So there's a year of overlap between the existing TIP and the one that we are developing in the process of developing. So we're currently in the FY 21 to 24 TIP. We'll be adopting the FY 24 to 27 TIP. The anticipated expenditures are provided by the transit agencies and VDOT. So this is the communication from the transit agencies on what they anticipate their expenditures will be over the next 4 fiscal years. And then VDOT is basically developing the expenditure information based on federal project spending that has already been approved through their 6-year improvement program. You'll see as you look through the document that there are 2 different types of projects. Projects of regional significance are pulled out and they are shown individually in the tip boxes, which provides an opportunity for us to make sure that we are aware of the status of those projects and how expenditures are being outlaid in support of developing those projects. And then there are projects that are grouped into categories that are similar in nature. So what happens is that by grouping projects, we are able to provide the state with a lot more flexibility in making sure that they're able to move forward on all of their maintenance and system improvement needs without having to come back to us for every single request to change funding allocations for projects that are categories. So if you look at the document, this is just a demonstration that shows the difference between these 2. So that the top box shows one of the regionally significant projects. You can see that there's a project description that's very specific on where that is occurring. And then for the grouped projects, you'll see that there's it states clearly at the top that they're grouped and it tells you what the category is. Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the changes from the original draft that we sent you to what was going to go into the draft that we provide for the public?
Sure, thanks, Ann. Since the packet was disseminated, I went back into the original sources of information from the transit providers, and I found some hidden road and some formulas. So the numbers and figures that are in your packet are have been updated with those figures shown on your screen. I have received approval from John, so the job summary does line up and add up correctly, and no word right now from CAD, but I think you noticed.
Regardless, online, we can ask any meeting.
My fingers are crossed. But what's in your packet will be replaced by those there.
Which table is this? You know what?
Yeah, it's page 34.
37, it's like 37 of the
And some of the cat and John.
There are, I guess, one new project that's different from what's in the current TIP. That's the addition of the governance study. There's also a new line item or a new project in TIP for a mobility manager. There was a previous project or previous mobility manager in the current tip, the previous funding of about $62,000. But this new tip will have that project with DKBC, the sponsor of ownership rather than John. And then of course the government stuff.
Mr. Williams, like the hand raised, you want to go ahead, Mr. Williams?
Thank you. So I believe those are the numbers that were sent over by our CFO, Barry Herring. So I'm good with the numbers.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So we'll confirm all of that information before we put it out as a last set of checks, but thank you for looking at that. This is a required federal document that we need to provide, and then this goes back to VDOT, and they use this to inform their STIP, the statewide transportation improvement program. So there are some requirements related to what we need to go through in order to adopt this plan. So we will, once we get all of these updates incorporated into the transportation improvement program, we will provide an opportunity to hold a 30-day comment period. So we'll have this up on our website, and we'll have it available and make their notification on our social media accounts so that people can read the plan and provide feedbacks. And then at the next policy board meeting in May, we will be holding the required public hearing. And at that point, you'll be requested to take action on whether or not you'd like to approve it either as presented or with any. So at this point, I think we have our VDOT staff here, we have our transit agency staff here, so if you have any questions, we'll be happy to.
As I'm getting lost in the project list, are there changes? Is there a place where it shows where the changes are? Because when I'm looking at the pages 37 and on, it's there's no way for me to really tell.
Oh, the changes from the original draft.
But it was corrected, so I'm sure there are changes in there. Just don't know where they are.
Yeah, we are starting with a new document, so this isn't necessarily going to show the changes that are tracked from the FY 21 to 24 projects. So you know, as we go through and we do the amendments, we'll show how the funding has changed when those are approved. But we can provide we can probably provide some clarification on which actual pages within the tip were changed in order to make sure that that's very clear.
And
Do you mean to the tables that were?
no, I'm looking at the I'm on project list because that's where I. So, well, it says page 10, but I'm way down at one page 48. So first of all, it says Charlottesville and MPO at the top. So is that all of us, or is that strictly in the city? Because it looks like it has some county projects in there.
You're looking at the ungrouped projects, so is that what you're saying?
Appendix A projects by grouping.
Mm-hmm.
Charlottesville MPO, but then it shows a whole lot of kind of rural area projects. So that name needs to be fixed.
So is it safe to assume that essentially anything in our whole region, regardless of the actual jurisdiction, that has federal monies attached to it is in this list?
Yes.
Okay. So it's inside the MPO.
But it shouldn't be called that. It's not the show. So I don't want people to think that there's nothing for the county in.
What's it? The heading, just the heading at the top, it's page 46 of the
It should be Charlesville, Albemarle.
Or T. They have the details here.
So appendix I, Charlesville, where is it?
CA.
Yeah.
And then I'll go back through all these and see which ones I don't understand, which is going to be lots of them. Thank you.
We appreciate you rabbit hole in finding that.
Yeah.
Question I had was, and I'm sorry, I've been on the board for a year, but I'm forgive my ignorance of some things. So this is crafted by y'all. You sort of have the overall oversight of this plan, working with the various member jurisdictions to inform what's here. Is that essentially correct?
We compile it with the information that they give us.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
That's coming from transit agencies and VDOT, not a switch from locality.
Okay.
Yeah, there's probably gonna be projects in here that you see that you have no clue what they are, what they're doing.
Because it was in your meeting.
Yeah.
No, the maintenance stuff for sure.
Yeah, but I saw some operation stuff too, like,
So for example, Emmett Street, streetscape, I think I saw it here. So that's in here because we've got some federal dollars helping that out. But other projects that the city's doing there would not be in here if they do not have any federal funds attached.
Yeah, if it's a locally funded project, so it's just something that you're saying is a priority for us, that they're just gonna do that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And I have a question. The.
No, I apologize, I know you all had asked me to put page numbers in the packet. I completely agree. So I'll work on that.
Online it's easy because it has.
Yeah.
And then there are different chapters in there that you can use as
Page
42 or something.
Page 19 in terms of the PDF, whereas pavement and bridge condition. PM2, that's page 11 of the actual document.
Page 11, these are the actual performance measures that we adopted as the MPO at our meeting last in January.
So the MPO 2021 baseline, was that like a sort of aspirational goal from several years ago, or because it's 73.5 when we adopted was this 45% for pavement new condition?
The 2021 should be the actual conditions of the MPO. That's the baseline. That's comparing what the actual conditions are to what the adopted targets are.
So the target was 45%, the actual was 73.5%.
Okay, so we're much better.
and the discussion we had here was just going with the generated targets that we're providing instead of locally calibrating our own.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we're
While we're in that neighborhood, on page 13 of the PDF with a new map for the MPO. And I'd like to know who did that, because it is so far out of the rural area. That it would make
page
it goes way to the west of Earlsville. I don't know if I have been in on the east side to know, I guess it's way beyond the state as well. So I assumed that there were some kind of density things that were involved in the MPO.
This is the same, after, isn't it, right? Yeah.
Well, when did it get changed to look like that? Literally, it went around the airport and went down. For years and years and years. So anyway, if this is, that's the answer to my question. That's one in some previous thing.
you've been in charge of more than you do.
No, I'm not in charge. Okay. But it does, yeah, it really widens the geography then that you're gonna have to deal with. That's
And
good.
those boundaries have been that way for a while.
That was from 2013. Okay.
Certainly. Interesting.
Mhm.
All right, fantastic. Any other questions on the tip? So no action required at this time. You mentioned about the public hearing. We'll approve the document in May. Any other questions? Any questions online? Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is the transit governance study update. And listen to Shannon, who will introduce the consultant and report a presentation from Beth.
Yeah, so you all are familiar with the regional transit governance study. It's to look at how to fund the projects in the regional transit vision plan, and was part of the recommendations of the vision plan. And it also is going to look at if we do increase revenue for transit in the region, how we'll manage that revenue and be accountable for it. So we hired AECOM to conduct this study, and we have Stephanie here to give a presentation on an update on how the project is going so far.
Great. Hi, Stephanie, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Can I go ahead and share screen? Would that work?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you again for inviting us to give you an update at this afternoon's meeting. So this will be just a short overview of the status of the project. It will take us we'll have about 10 minutes and then 5 minutes for questions. And so many of you already have received the phase one of this of the phase one memo to review, and we received some good comments as well. But this afternoon, we would like to just go through a very high level study overview, talk about the work that we've done so far and what we have remaining, any preliminary outcomes we've had, and the next steps. And so starting this project last fall, in November, December, we finished phase one of the study. We have 5 phases in total. So phase one was the existing conditions. Phase two, which we just completed, is the peer study, where we are looking at governance structures of other transit agencies in similar areas. Phase three will look at potential revenue generation sources. And so Lucinda talked about the transit vision study and how we have those alternative futures for transit governance in Charlottesville. And so what we are going to look at here is try to identify potential sources of funding and how we are going to fund some of those improvements and what that would look like for the jurisdictions in Region 10. Once we have some potential sources down, then we'll start to craft some alternatives for governance scenarios of what that would look like in Region 10. And phase 5 will have at phase 5 we would combine all the stakeholder engagement we do in phase 4 to finalize what that recommended governance structure would look like and those funding strategies. And so just a quick and so that's just to give you an idea of where we are in the study. So according to phases, we are still we're about in the middle portion or early part of the middle portion. We are about to begin phase 3. And so we are just doing a round of updates on phase 2 analysis. Now, because you've already gone through phase 1, just as a reminder, what we went through in the existing conditions was looking at what the existing operators in the areas have, looking at their organizational structure, their governance structure, and their existing funding. We also looked at the existing legislation that is available for the Charlottesville, Albemarle area for potential authority, and did a review on that. And so just very briefly, just very high level, we spoke, we had interviews with both, with CATS, with JONT, and with UTS, which are the 3 main operators in the area. We got to understand how they are organized, understand the organizational structure, and what the governance looks like. We also discussed what their funding situation is like and how they interact as far as where their services overlap or how they coordinate in that area. And also in situations where there's some service that is contracted or funding provided, for example, from the university, what that looks like. And so all of those details are in the phase 1 memo, which you already received a link to in the agenda. So the next part of phase 1 was also looking at the legislative authority. And so part of this study was to review what the current legislation. So that's what you see in this first box here is this Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Transit Authority, which exists. So we did a review on what are the authorities, what are the powers, what are the boundaries, how is it structured, what is the potential governance that is laid out in the legislation. And then what we did was also compare it to other funding structures in Virginia. So we looked at the MVTA structure, we looked at HR TAC, CVTA, and then other potential frameworks. So for example, in Virginia, we have what we call the public service corporations, which John's is one of. Also GRTC in Richmond is also set up and organized as a public service corporation. And then there's also the option of transportation district commissions, which Hampton Roads Transit is, as well as NVTC. And so the comparative analysis is all in our memo, but this table here is not to go into details, but it's just to show you just some highlighted characteristics from each of those 4 that we looked at and some of the main differences across.
That's a quick question, please.
Of course.
Interrupt. So the first column, the CARTA, you described it. So we do have some existing legislation that was approved a long time ago. Is that right?
Correct. So that's the Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Transit Authority.
Okay, so that exists.
It exists, but it's in legislation only. It's not functional. So if there were to be an entity to be set up, something we could look at would be, and that would go into my next slide here. Well, I'll go back to that. Is because we have the existing legislation set up for the CARTA, we can call it. We can look at either modifying that to address whatever changes we would want in the entire region based on this process that we are going through. So towards the end, when we identify the exact characteristics we want of what a transit entity or an authority would look like, we could either modify the existing legislation. That's this second option here. There's also the option of creating a completely new entity, a new legislation. And then or third is modifying another framework. So one of the others that we presented at first to match whatever characteristics. But what are those characteristics that we might want to consider in setting up such an authority or some other structure? Is what is the amount of funding that we want, potential funding for now and even for the future, thinking about the transit vision study, looking at those alternative futures of the constrained and unconstrained analysis or whatever is in between that the stakeholders deem appropriate. You might also want to consider potential side effects of any funding generated. What would the boundaries be? Is it going to be all of the members of Region 10? If you look at the existing CARTA legislation, the members of that the authority are, it says Charlottesville and all portions of Albemarle County. There's also all or portions of Fluvanna, Green, Louisa, Nelson. So these are all potential boundaries for such an entity. We can also include private nonprofit or tourist-driven agencies, higher education facilities, example, the university, UVA, or other public transportation agencies. These are all options. Or other cities or towns that would want to opt in, as long as the existing members approve of it. So there's many combinations to consider in what the potential boundaries would look like. Looking at what a potential governing board would be. And this is where our peer study is insightful or helpful in looking at what other agencies or other operators do in terms of how they govern and make decisions for their agency. So next, we in phase 2 was now digging into what are other agencies doing in order to identify the agencies or operators. We had some selection criteria looking at places that has similar or near population or operating characteristics in terms of ridership, operating budget per capita. We also wanted to make sure that those areas had a presence of at least a large university, and with that university also having a bus system, as we have in the UVA situation, and also multiple operators within the same jurisdiction, like we have here with Johns, with CATS, with UTS. So those are some of the factors we considered in selecting the peer areas. And so we narrowed it down to six areas. So we had Iowa City, then Ann Arbor in Michigan, Bloomington, Blacksburg, State College, and Ithaca in New York. And so for each of these areas, we first did these, of course, online research reviews, and then also followed up with interviews, video interviews with their staff. In most cases, we spoke to either the CEO or the director and an additional person. And so these interviews were very insightful, and we have the results of that also in our phase 2 memo, which is being reviewed now. But as we were going through the study, just giving you an overview, some of the things we were conscious of or focused on was looking at their service, looking at the history, how they evolved over time, especially in the cases where there was some consolidation, as in the case of Ithaca in New York, of 3 agencies combining into one. We delved into that a little bit more, looking at their sources of governance, source of funding, and their structure. Now, this table here is just a summary of the 6 agencies that we reviewed, giving you an overview of where the years they started, their comparative budgets, the jurisdictions that they serve, the type of governance they have, and any major organizational changes that have happened. Now, you'll notice that we had a good variety of different types of governance types amongst the agencies. We had 2 that were city departments, just similar to CATS for the City of Charlottesville. We also had a public transportation corporation. We had 1 nonprofit, 501c3, and 2 authorities. One was a joint municipal authority, and the other was a regular transportation authority. So because of this diversity in the way they're organized and governed, we also saw differences in the way that they make decisions in terms of funding, in terms of the service they provide, and even plans for the future. Some of the notable, I'd say, takeaways from our discussions and our chats with them, I would say was something that came up in at least many of the, at least 2 or 3 of the agencies, was their relationships with the other agencies in their jurisdiction was very casual. Most of the time, it didn't go beyond just coordinating on shared bus stops, for example, or for long-term planning. In some cases where there was very close coordination, we saw discussions of potential consolidation. So for example, in the case of Bloomington and in Iowa City, in both places, they had raised the topic of consolidation for efficiency. In the case of Bloomington, what worked against them really was there was a lot of lobbying by the agencies throughout the state because of their state funding formula. The consolidation would have increased their funding, their state funding, and reducing it for the others. So there was a lot of conflict there with the other operators. But since then, their formulas have changed and is no longer dependent on that. And so they are thinking this might be something they could pick up in the next 3 or 4 years as well. And in Iowa City as well, this was something they talked about. They talked about it a few years ago. It wasn't politically feasible, but the director we spoke to seemed to think that that was possible in the near term. Another thing that was significant was the close working relationships with the university. In almost all the cases, the university funded a significant portion of the transit system in the millions of dollars. In the case of Blacksburg, for example, the university provides all of their local funding, with the city of Blacksburg provided zero to little dollars. And so that was very unique. In the other agencies as well, either through contracted service or some sort of arrangement where they also provide service on campus or parts of campus, they were providing funding in upwards of at least $1 or $2 million each year for their service. And so that seemed to be something that we could look a little bit more into if we were to think about increasing revenue generation in this region. Another interesting funding revenue that we saw from at least 3 of the operators was that they were contracted service with housing developments and apartment complexes. And that also was a large portion of their internally generated funds. They would provide shuttles or routes to the housing complexes or the apartment buildings to their main routes. And this seemed more common in the areas where the universities were larger. So that is also a good potential if it is applicable to this region. Then in the case of Bloomington, for example, we noticed that they had what helped them with increasing revenue recently in 2022, they passed a referendum that increased their property taxes for transit. And that was for the idea of innovative transit. And so they increased their funding by about $4 million each year, starting in FY23 to fund a new BRT project. And so the BRT being one of the city's priorities, but in all, it was the city really pushed for increasing transit funding, and the people, the residents were very supportive of it, and it passed overwhelmingly. And so potentially with the results from the transit vision study, there could be a way of framing this with a high possibility of increasing the revenues in that way. And so the details of all of this are outlined in the phase 2 memo, and you'll have a chance to review it as well. So the next steps for this project is to initiate phase 3, which is the potential revenue generation. And so we'll develop a list of potential sources. We'll continue with discussions with members, knowledgeable people in Virginia for transit funding. We'll planning to make contact with members from the CTV or other bodies that can help us with phase 3. Then we will move on to individual discussions with the jurisdictions. And so the Region 10 members will be reaching out and coordinating with the TJPDC to set up one-on-one discussions to talk more about their priorities and what seems feasible for them as part of our stakeholder engagement process. And then move into phase 4, which would be developing those governance scenarios. So we are about midway now. We are beginning to be in the midway. So we're still early in the process, but I believe with the work we've done so far, we are in a good place to really do some good work in the summer as well. So this is all we have for the update, and we can take any questions you have.
Thank you for that. That was very informative and helpful. Any questions here?
I do have a couple.
Yeah, go.
Thank you. In your interrogatories with the peers, do they already have taxing power? Each of
Yes,
these.
some of them, not all of them do, but some of them do. I have this.
That's where we failed in the legislature. They gave us the ability to have the structure, but they wouldn't give us the ability to fund it.
Yes, so actually, CATA is pretty similar to, has that same structure. So they are a joint municipal authority, but they don't have taxing power. So it's similar to the RTA legislation we have here. And so because of that, they still need funding from the member jurisdictions. However, in some of the other cases, even for Bloomington, even though it's a city department, they have a property tax. It wasn't an authority, but they still have a tax. So I think it's where there's a drive and interest in transit, it can be done, even if it's not an authority collecting the money, collecting the funds.
And the other question I had was for Blacksburg and State College, I understand that the university students who ride the bus system are a huge boon to the statistics, which then draw down God's more money from the federal government than we could possibly do because we don't get access to the riders of the university. We're just on our municipal. So were there other communities who benefited from that joint operation as well?
Could you repeat your question? Sorry, I couldn't hear very clearly.
I think I saw or heard you say or something that Blacksburg either technically has the bus in the city and they run it for the city or something. And I don't know who runs the bus in State College, but I know that it's a combined university municipal benefit as far as people riding it. So I don't know who's funding that, but.
But one of her points was that if it's with a university, there's automatically a huge number of riders.
The ridership.
Tax.
Yes.
The funding.
Mr. Meyer and his friend.
Okay. All right.
So I guess your question is in the cases where we see the university providing significant revenue to the system, is it because they're also providing that bus operation? I think that's the question.
Yeah, that's right.
If there is, whatever the arrangements are, we would like to know.
Yes, so in the third row here, we see that for Blacksburg, for CATA, and for TCAT, they provide the transit service for the campus. But in the other three agencies, the campus also runs their own system. But in all 6 cases, we saw that the university still had that, they still contracted service from the operators for substantial revenue. But even if they had their own system, there was still a large portion with either running loops around the campus or different types of routes that would support them to raise more revenue.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any questions in the room? Any questions online? Okay, no, all right. Thank you very much. This was very helpful. We appreciate your time and willingness to share this with us.
Thank you for having us. All right, thank you.
There'll be some documents that will be emailed to us or have already been sent out in terms of their status report. Is that what she indicated?
Phase 1.
One of them is linked to the agenda,
Okay.
the MPO packet that you guys received is linked. The other one we can send out. We have both of them online.
Well, you do have phase 2.
So we can put the presentation online and phase 1 is in the packet,
Right.
if there's a link. Phase 2 will be available soon.
Okay, great.
You can send us that link when it comes out.
Yes.
That's where the part of it's going to start. Okay. Good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we can move on to the next item, revisions to FY23 Unified Planning Work Program. UPWP. And Sandy, you're going to give you the request.
Yeah, so since we have a couple of things that we're going to talk about related to the Unified Planning Work Program, I'll just go through a really brief overview of what this is and why it's important. The Unified Planning Work Program basically is our opportunity to communicate to the state and federal agencies that give our MPO funding what it is that we're going to use the funding for. And it gives them an opportunity to confirm that that is consistent with what their priorities and objectives are for these funding expenditures. So every year we get an allocation that is communicated through our state agencies, VDOT and DRPT, that gives us our funding allocations. 80% of our funding comes from federal sources, so that's the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. And then our state agencies provide a 10% match, and then we also provide a 10% local match. So that's how our MPO planning efforts are funded. It is a federal requirement to develop this work program and also to communicate any changes in the requested funding as far as moving funding from one year to the next. So this is what we're really talking about tonight, is an opportunity to move funding that is programmed for fiscal year 23 and make it available for fiscal year 24. All right. So our fiscal year 23 budget, which is the budget for our current fiscal year, was estimated at about $500,000, and that included a little bit of rollover from some previous years for a variety of reasons. And then VDOT also provides an additional budget for their staff through the state planning and research program funding that they have. So VDOT is supporting their staff through resources outside of what is programmed to the MPO specifically. There are two types of rollover funding that you're going to see in a couple of minutes. So the first is capital. So that means if we get through a fiscal year and we don't spend all of our funding now, we still get that money from the FHWA side of the allocation, but we don't get it the next year. We get it in 2 years. So we'll have some rollover funding. We have some rollover funding from fiscal year 21 that will roll over into this current fiscal year, fiscal year 23. In order to have funding available from one fiscal year to the next fiscal year, we have to make an active request to de-obligate the funds from this fiscal year and ask for it to be made available for the next fiscal year. So we would like to go ahead and make a request to de-obligate a little over $100,000, $105,000 total from the fiscal year FY23 and to actively roll it over into fiscal year 24. The two line items that we've identified that we would like to deliver this funding from is one of these is for the long range transportation plan development. As you may recall, we had identified in this fiscal year when we approved the Unified Planning Work Program that we would retain the services of a consultant to help us develop the program. That was based on rollover funding that was beyond what our annual allocations were due to a number of different reasons that had accumulated. So what we are asking for is that we have estimated how much of that contractual amount with our consultants will be spent through this fiscal year. And we're requesting that the balance, which is $72,600, be rolled over into next fiscal year, specifically for the support of the consultant services in the long range transportation plan. The remaining balance that makes up this $105,000 is based on this on-call services line item. As you may recall, we had initially approved a draft of the Unified Planning Work Program for fiscal year 23, and then we got updated allocations for VDOT that showed that there were additional allocations beyond what we had initially expected. And at that time, we processed a revision to the Unified Planning Work Program, and we did not identify additional tasks at that point, but we put it into this on-call services line item. So the balance of the $105,000 that we are requesting to have available next year is coming from that on-call services, which means that none of the rollover request is from planned activities that we expected to be undertaken this year. So this will not be impacting any of the work products that we expect to complete. So we do need to go ahead and if you all would agree that this funding needs to be made available next year, we need to go ahead and process that the application request, so this is an item that we will need action.
So this formally de-obligates these funds for this fiscal year so that we can have them available next fiscal year.
Yes. Correct.
All right. Any questions, Randy?
No, we don't want it to get away.
One has corrected, but we want it.
So, George, yes, you do. So, we do need a motion to de-obligate these funds.
Does our motion need to include where it's going, or just that part of?
We'll talk about that in a second. So you need to, does it need to indicate the specific tasks that it's going to?
No, just that it, I mean, I move that we de-obligate the funds from fiscal year 23 and reinvest them in.
Yeah, perfect.
Then a second. All in favor?
Right. Now we can talk about FY24. So I was a little optimistic that you all would support that request. So this is just the draft of the work program that we're developing for FY24. So taking some of that rollover funding as well as any of that passive rollover funds. So there's a line item from FY22 that shows the passive rollover that's going to be added, and this shows what our anticipated budget is going to be for FY24 with all sources. So just to give you a little bit of a breakdown of this table, this is showing this first line is the annual funding that is estimated from the FHWA and VDOT side right now. So that's our first line item. The second item is the passive rollover from 2 years ago. This item right here is the active rollover that we are requesting. And so this is the total that we're getting from the FHWA VDOT side. Then on the FTA side, we are not anticipating rollover. We're anticipating that we will spend down that budget in full before the end of this fiscal year. So the estimated allocations for FY24 from the FTA side is 129,000. And then this is the line item right here that is estimated for the VDOT SPF for their to. They've given us the estimate that's been pretty consistent over the last few years. That could be amended though once they get their final guidance to us. So as far as the work programming, this is going to be pretty similar to what you all have seen as far as the format. There are a couple of line items that I'll mention. These task one administrative items are pretty standard items that we have to include every year just for the ongoing compliance with doing our reporting and invoicing, staffing committees, and information sharing. I do want to point out that we increased this line item right here under information sharing from what it has been in the past. And that is because one of the activities we would like to undertake in FY24 is to modernize the MPO website to be consistent with the updated format to the TJPDC website. So that line item is a little bit increased from where it has been previously. The long-range transportation planning tasks is where you'll see that there's variation from year to year. So we will be continuing the development of the 2050 LRTP to meet our goal for updating it every 5 years and complying with the federal regulations. This line item right here for the comprehensive safety action plan is one that we are also including as a recommended line item for the road work program. And that's for our staff to support the development of the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. So this will be above and beyond. The other thing I want to point out is that there's a new requirement for the FHWA funding that requires us to spend 2.5% of our planning, FHWA planning funds on complete streets activities. So this will also help us comply with that requirement since this will take a multimodal all systems safety approach to improving safety outcomes. The MPO boundary analysis was one that we were hoping that we would be able to complete this fiscal year, but we're just now starting to get some information from VDOT about what the new eligible urbanized areas might be. And so we're probably going to need to continue that activity into next fiscal year in order to process any discussions around potential adjustments to the MPO boundaries if it is warranted based on the This line item about the transit governance is really intended to support the completion of the transit governance study that we have been discussing, as well as support our staff's work for any follow-up that is needed in order to support recommendations that come out of that. This line item about the commuter assistance program strategic plan is also included in the rural work program as a suggested task, and this is to support the development of a required strategic plan for our rideshare program. We have applied for a technical assistance grant to complete that grant through DRPT that will basically cover the cost of the consultants. But this will help provide additional support for the staffing needs for the development of that plan. And then the last one in that list is this travel demand model update. So VDOT maintains the regional travel demand model, which helps us project system operations and conditions in future years that has to be updated regularly, and it will involve some coordination among the MPO staff and the locality staff to get that. Yeah.
A computer model simulation that is housed somewhere by VDOT, or what is the model? Is that kind of an abstraction or software models?
Yeah, it is an actual model. Do you want to say anything about that, Sean, Michael, Chuck?
Sure.
Got it.
Yeah, traffic model is, I'm thinking with things groups name it down central law that actually helps run traffic model that's based on, various generate traffic in the MPO area, residential stuff. You can run multiple scenarios based on different, priorities that you might have that will generate outcomes and show you where you're going to have discussion on.
Okay, great, thank you.
Want to take another one?
That sounds pretty cool. Yeah. Mr. Chambers and I can go and take a look at it. Yeah.
Those do the
Demonstration here. The trouble was, it said that Albemarle wasn't gonna help us.
Yeah.
Doesn't help us a lot.
There are some limitations that you can learn. And then we are maintaining this on-call services or contingency budget. Part of this is related to us waiting to find out about some other initiatives that we are undertaking. So if it turns out that we're not successful in pursuing those initiatives, we will come back and look at whether there's additional programming that we want to provide. But depending on whether or not other funding opportunities come through, that will be something that we look at. The short range transportation planning, these are pretty standard line items that we include each time, which includes the ongoing maintenance of the transportation improvement program. So once we adopt it, there are sometimes changes that need to happen so that there's some support to maintain, developing smart scale projects, the bike ped and the transit and the travel demand management performance targets and those kinds of things. So this is really just a draft to show the projects and the tasks that we know we're going to need to complete, but it's really an opportunity for you all to provide any feedback. And otherwise, we will be developing the draft unified planning work program for FY24, bringing that back to you all for approval at your meeting in May.
Thank you. On page 4 of that document. UPW fiscal year 2024.
The introduction.
Yes, it says for fiscal year 2022. Is that just a typo or is there something here that?
Yeah, that's just a typo. I thought I caught that in one place, but maybe I did.
That's fine. Yeah, it's just.
Oh.
You are.
Okay, so no action required this time. We'll get this in May.
Yeah, unless you have any discussion that you want to, however, what's presented here.
Any questions now or any questions online? Okay, excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. All right, next item, letter of support for the DRPT grant application for corridor identification and development program of the Commonwealth Corridor. I read that letter and said, boy, that really looks neat.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of information beyond this, but the DRPT that reached out to us. So they should say, they reached out to us and asked us to support a corridor improvement grant that they're applying for through the Federal Railroad Association grant. So it's looking at the east-west rail corridor and looking at improving passenger rail service between the Hampton Roads area all the way to Southwest Virginia, including a future direct connection between Charlottesville and the Richmond region, which would improve the efficiency of passenger rail travel pretty significantly for our area. So we have prepared a draft letter of support that we can provide from the Charlottesville Albemarle MPO if you all would so choose.
That's on page 122 of the packet. We need a motion and a second for the vote.
I move that we send this letter in support of Honorable Pete Buttigieg. How about that?
And the Secretary of D.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All in favor? Aye. Fantastic. Great, thank you. All right, I guess the next here is an update on smart scale.
Yep, so, oh, I didn't slide on that. Scale is a process that doesn't really sleep for us. We've adopted a process to really be considering this year round, and it sounds like we're a little bit ahead of about 96, but doesn't hurt to be prepared. I think everybody's familiar with smart scale, that this is the state's process that we use to select transportation projects for funding, and it's the main source of new construction funding for transportation projects. Currently, based on the existing rules around smart scale, which are always being evaluated, and this could be amended in the next round, we're a little bit ahead of where I think the state is as far as knowing what any sort of revisions might be applied in future rounds. But as far as we know at this point, we can submit 4 projects. And for projects that are submitted by the MPO, we can submit projects that meet a couple of different criteria. So first of all, any project that's submitted by any entity must meet a need that is identified in the state's transportation plan, which is VTrans. And then the MPO is eligible to submit projects that either meet a need identified on the corridor statewide significance or in the regional network that is established in VTrans. So there are other projects that localities are able to submit that the MPO is not eligible to submit because it doesn't meet either of those criteria. In round 9, we implemented a new process to support application development. So we identified the projects early, and then we identified projects that needed some additional support as far as developing the application and defining the scope prior to submitting the application. And so, as you recall, we conducted a pretty robust public engagement effort around the Albemarle River Bridge project to identify what the location was and what the alignment was that we wanted to be considered for that submission of that application. In round 6, we would still like to identify what the priorities are early and determine the projects that we are interested in submitting that may need additional development prior to that application submission. However, there are some differences from round 6 as well. And largely this is related to the phase of development that our projects are in. What has happened is that since the last long-range transportation plan was adopted, we have a really nice problem in that we have worked through the submission of most of our high priority projects for the region. We've been successful at getting a number of these funded. So we don't have a long list of outstanding projects that are ready to go that have been developed through planning initiatives. We are in the process of developing a new pipeline. So, we're developing new projects that we want to have in the queue, but we're not in a state where those are well defined. We're doing that through a number of initiatives that includes the long-range transportation plan, the comprehensive safety action plan. We have the race grant that was submitted, and then VDOT has also identified a couple of pipeline projects that they're working on, as well as projects that might come out of the localities planning initiatives that they're undertaking as priority projects. So,
Does that bubble up through the MPO tech?
yeah, this will all be vetted through the long range transportation plan. So our hope is that as we talk about all the projects in these pipelines, it will start creating a list of projects that will potentially feed into the long range transportation plan. Yeah. The other thing that's a little bit different is that the type of support that is needed to develop the outstanding projects is a little bit different. Based on the phase of development that we're in right now, meaning that a lot of these need a little bit more technical support versus support around the public engagement, which the MPO staff is a little bit more capable of facilitating without a lot of outside support. So as we start looking at the rounds at the application development for round 6, one of the first things we did was review the unfunded projects from the last 2 rounds of smaller scale, just to see where there may be opportunities to vet those projects. And so moving forward, the 2 that probably have the most interest that haven't been funded yet is the District Avenue Roundabout and Hydraulic Road, which scored very well and really is very close to being able to be resubmitted again if needed. And then also potentially looking at the 5th Street multi-modal improvements. That project did not score very well, but it is a really important project that has been identified by multiple localities. And so we could work with VDOT to determine if there might be opportunities to break out the scope a little bit and try to find smaller projects within the large project that was submitted that might be a little more less costly and more competitive.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sandy. It is on page 125 of the packet.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's fair to add at this point, round 5, there's staff recommendations, but nothing is finalized at this point for project will, because the TDP members can change things around. Round 5.
Meaning there could be some that are recommended that don't actually get funded, that could then go back and be resubmitted in round 6.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa.
Yes.
So they might be added to this list, but then if they don't.
Yes, so at the end of round 5, so this summer we will know which one are definitely moving forward, then those other ones can come back into this queue.
These other projects that are grayed out are not necessarily because they're not important, but either they had not been identified as much of a high priority, or there's other work like the Urbana River Bridge. We know that there is additional work that needs to be done that we're working on outside of smart scale, but we're not in a phase where we have more information that would necessarily make that a more competitive project in the next round at this point. So it may not make sense to identify that as one of the projects that we want to move forward for round 6. Obviously, we'll know in June if we are successful getting the race grant funding, and maybe we'll have another conversation at that point. Did you have a question, Superintendent?
Yeah, is a criteria, or let's consider having a criteria going forward that the community has to be unified behind this, because I think that's what set the phrase urbanization is that there was no agreement about that. Amongst very vocal. The word was split, the community was split. So that probably got in our way. We went upstairs.
So there's some consensus, right, under a public planning process or that
Would save a lot of heartburn later if we make sure that we get that checked off first.
And a lot of people that were spending probably development.
Not go anywhere.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you speak just really briefly about the 2 VDOT pipeline projects? What they, I know you don't have seen that, okay.
Yeah, these are initiatives that are coming from VDOT, and so you know, we can talk a little bit about the previous projects, but these are other projects that have been identified as priorities that VDOT is going to be taking the lead on, sort of walking through and identifying potential improvements based on these areas. And Chuck, Michael, Sean, I don't know who wanted to review those, but I can turn it over to.
And I'll just start and I just, we might start there kind of going to the details of the events, but it's really through the Secretary of Transportation's office, their most planning investment, that the pipeline studies are administered through, and they are meant to feed one scale or any other transportation funding sources. To develop projects, and they go through a public process, so the public is involved throughout the entire time as recommendations are being brought forward. So that public piece is done as part of the development of the project.
Speak to the extent of these projects. The one you're looking at is the one on Barracks Road, running from left to right to Georgetown to Emmett Street in the city, as well as looking at the interchange there, bypass. Issues that you can see down from that lower portion, bike ped and transit issues, as well as capacity preservation along the corridor. So that's what we're looking at that part of the project. Hopefully we, probably one of the things that is, there's sort of 3 steps in the project. The first one is sort of like trying to identify what the real issues are out there before you go too far. And then there's the second step is deciding what the solutions are. And then the third one is really trying to get down to brass tacks. Not really good engineering solution be there that would enable us to come up with solid concept plan, and that's part of the application.
So this first project that was identified is looking at the Barracks Road to 250 above. Is it looking at the interchange itself, or is it looking at Barracks Road?
Yeah, from left to right, it's on Barracks Road, starting in Georgetown and going to the end of the city at Emmett Street. It does include the interchange itself.
Okay.
We've had some problems with backing on the northbound and bypass traffic backing up from the interchange. Getting into the main line. It's a dangerous situation.
And then the second project is looking at a section of Ivy Road that also includes the 250 interchange.
But this one, I guess it's important to sort of outline, it's really going from starting from this time from right to left. It starts at the intersection of Old Ivy and Ivy Road.
Oh,
And then comes to the interchange, and then, of course, I guess it takes us all the way over to where the Forest Head is. And then looks at some of the issues that we have on the main lines. I think you're going to find that when you get back to that traffic model we were talking about earlier, that this stretch of the bypass has been identified in the previous round as a problem, technical congestion, and I think we all are experiencing that. Which being the problem is that the bridges that were built originally part of the project are relatively narrow from wing wall to wing wall. So you really want to pull off capacity out having to rebuild those bridges. So it's going to be an interesting trick how that gets done. This study is not looking at the area of the triangle about, which you may not have been.
It will, though. Yeah, it will. It will.
Okay.
Just something different.
Yeah, it may be that. But I mean, the discussion I've had is it's going to look at the entire area. Yeah.
okay. I'm not sure what all that means, but.
One of the people want to talk about this area, Council thinks it's just to the west of the bypass and north of 250. There's around Faulkner Drive and Old Ivy. There's 3 streets that are there that you can potentially sort of turn into the. It's not a roundabout, there's an ability to build it. There's 3 streets that go other grounds. It's jokingly referred to, maybe not jokingly, as the triangle about.
Okay, triangle, okay, interesting.
One element I will make sure that, because I have it all drawn out with red marker on that, but picture that you are going. Pardon me?
The lane that is right there.
Did I send it to you? Maybe I forgot. If you're northbound on the bypass and you get off on the yellow loop in the lower right hand turn, you can, without stopping and paying attention to any traffic light, just go right. And the people in the mornings, well, anytime basically, the people are going bypass to eastbound 250, just keep going with impunity, and they completely block up the eastbound 250 people who are sitting at the light. The people at the light at the exit that they are from bypass north to 250 east and west, they sit there for 3 or 4 rounds because the people from the bypass in the morning just keep going because there's no stop sign. Or there may be a stop sign or a yield sign, but they don't pay attention. And if there were a stop sign there to stop that traffic, then 250 would be able to keep moving. So now that you've heard that, I will make sure I send you the map.
And if somebody left the traffic that's coming off of 250, like to have them just stop.
Well, the people going west have to stop, but the people going east have to, should stop also, so that the people on 250 get to go when they have their turn. And so
That
that,
explains my frustrations in the morning, because I'm coming south and then going, under back around to go east.
and then you don't go anywhere.
Yeah. No, like, what? Between that,
I would share the map that the citizen provided to me because they haven't gotten anywhere trying to get it.
Sorry, we would start the study. Two more weeks. Can't take it more.
Just do it. It'll be in your inbox. when you're- Well, the sixth question, that I hope that-
So just to review, so what we're recommending, is based on our capacity and based on the number of initiatives that we're undertaking, is that we continue to work on developing our pipeline of future projects, so through all those other planning initiatives that we discussed. And that we'll use that process to develop, identify projects that will be submitted in a smart scale. But for this upcoming process is to focus on supporting the development of existing priority projects that have already been identified for Round 6.
yeah, and I'll just say from personally, I think the project at District Avenue, if we were close to getting funding for that last time, I'd love to see us apply again, because that would really let the Meadows, that whole neighborhood of the city have more accessible, people be able to go in and out of it, and yeah, just accessibility for that whole neighborhood of the city, I think it would be really good.
And you talk about the two different pools of funding, because we would, like we talked about in MPO Tech.
Yeah, so as far as scale, you'll recall that there are two different funds of projects. There's the high priority fund, which is a statewide fund. Those are the projects that we are eligible to submit as the MPO. So we are competing for any projects that the MPO submits, is competing against other projects within the state. And then there's also the district grant, which is funding that's provided specifically to the Culpeper district. The localities that submit projects are eligible for both the statewide funding program and the district funding program. What happened with the District Avenue project is that it actually scored higher than other projects that were competing, that were competing for the district funding, but because we submitted the MPO submitted the application for the district project, it was not eligible to receive the district funding. So one of the discussions that we'll be having is whether or not it might make sense for Albemarle to be the applicant for that project in the future, just because it provides more opportunities for that project to receive funding.
For both pools.
And the city, there were right-of-way issues, but I think the cost of the two properties there was the major, one of the major.
So the county,
On the city side of the road.
so it brings the county and the city at that point, right? And your point is that it makes more sense for it to be presented through the county.
It could, I think the entirety of the roundabout itself is within the county. Jessica, can you confirm that? I don't think.
There are two houses in the neighborhood of Cedar Hill. I thought
It is the city line. I believe the city line is sort of southern side of
Okay,
I think that's where it's in the city.
Okay.
So majority of it's in the county,
yeah.
I believe.
We can double check on that, but that's certainly something that we could explore.
So when do we need to have our sort of ducks in a row in terms of to advocate? Is that in the summertime?
I think so. I think there are still some outstanding questions that probably need to be answered. Do you know from the VDOT side, do you know when there will be decisions about changes to Round 6?
I think it's gonna be later this year. I mean, like, end of the year.
They're going through the process now of doing all the surveys, and we just really started with the study, so.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I think I saw one at a conference last week towards the end of the year, but of course, we don't really start into the process officially until spring 24. With that said, I mean, I think we all are recognizing the benefit of working on these projects earlier and spending more time trying to get public input. And I go back with the planning goals and the engineering realities, trying to create an iterative process where we can get the best project possible before.
I think what we really need to know probably in the next set of meetings is, are there additional projects or initiatives that you all want us to be considering for development? And then we probably need to identify what kind of additional support would be needed to make those projects ready. And then we can have a discussion about what projects we want to move forward with.
Okay, great.
Especially in the absence of having a long-range transportation plan wrapped up, because that's not gonna happen until finally really around 7.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
all right, well, thank you.
yeah.
So I think that takes us to staff updates.
Yeah, so I have a couple that I'll start us off with. The first one is related to the long range transportation plan. We completed the stakeholder discussion group, so we have 3 different groups, so 3 different sets of stakeholders. We got some really good feedback. So there's a technical memo that is included in your packets for review with some suggested changes to the draft goals and objectives based on that feedback. We will bring that back to you all for a deeper discussion next time. But I don't think we're quite all the way there yet, but it gives you an idea of how some of the feedback that we heard from those stakeholder discussions are being considered. So we'll have a bigger conversation. And then we've also been working on the, we completed the scope with Renaissance and Michael Baker on the project prioritization tool. So if you all want to see anything related to that, I'm happy to show you what that tool looks like, but we'll also be discussing that at future meetings because we'll need to be making some decisions around how to evaluate the different projects. And then related to the raise grant application, I would like to thank VDOT for their support and preparing that application and for championing it and getting the agency to stand behind the project with us. We were able to successfully submit the application. We asked for just over $3 million, and we should find out about the outcome of that at the end of June. So keep your fingers and toes crossed until then.
Excellent.
Yeah. And then Safe Streets and Roads for All will probably be, we had a scoping meeting with VDOT to start working on the crash analysis that VDOT is going to do. And then we're working with the US DOT and the Federal Highway Administration on getting the grant agreements in place. So we'll probably be kicking that off pretty shortly as well.
Great, I think the next item is for Sarah to give us an update on Acton Express and the rideshare activities.
Yeah, this will be nice and short. So Acton Express, of course, launched their expanded service. So additional hours in the evening to accommodate hopefully the hospital workers there in in February. So far, numbers have held very steady. They are still averaging about 58 riders a day. In the February reports, as we're still trying to get the word out about that new route to the public and specifically the UVA employees. I know we're still working on additional marketing initiatives to help support and let folks know about that. With regards to rideshare, we are kind of just finished all of the grant applications for that were due February 1st. One of them being the technical assistance grant for a strategic plan for the program, which is a state requirement, and that was in addition to our regular operating funds. So we're kind of in a holding pattern of getting ready to prep all of our fun spring activities. May is bike month, so we are working to coordinate and help support activities with that, both on the state level and on the local level. You know, Earth Month and Clean Commute is usually something that we do a lot of promotions around, so kind of stay tuned for that. And we are actually today just wrapped up the timeline for proposals for an RFP looking to help bolster a media content library. So that way we will have local images and videos and things like that to use in all of our marketing going forward. We should hopefully be starting on that really soon.
And thank you for the update. Then Mr. Nichols, updates on the FY 21 to 24 adjustment. Did that happen earlier?
So it's slightly different.
Okay.
And
You just don't.
They were just anxious to talk about this one.
Yes, there was an adjustment to a tip project in the current tip. This came from VDOT. It is to the Darby Farm that servicing schedule for the industry street project. VDOT indicated that there were some small increases in the total servicing amount and some adjustments to the repayment schedule. An adjustment does not require policy with action.
Anything else of interest on that topic that is administrative?
I'll defer to Michael if he has any.
All kinds of people have the products. Okay. Round table discussion, I think we're at that point. Great. So right off the bat, our friends from VDOT, something for the group.
Just kind of follow up with the smart scale review process. It's being led by the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment as a request through the Secretary's office. ATCS has consulted with an independent review. Some of you may have received some surveys, asking for some input. There are some additional surveys that are coming up. First survey closed, I believe, on March 10th. They were seeking input from the CTV, stakeholders, elected officials on the smart scale process. I would urge you all to be forthcoming of what your thoughts are about smart scale, because now it's time to talk about it. We're looking at holistic changes potentially to the program to make it better. I am on the executive working group that is kind of steering this thing, so if you don't want to submit a survey, let me know. And I can move that information forward. Yes, as far as the timeline goes, they're planning to adopt any policy changes by December of this year. So they're kind of on a crunch to work through this effectively. They're planning on presenting the recommendations to the CTV for policy adoption in October. So if you back this up, we're probably going to have a pretty good idea of what we're going to be targeting sometime in September. I would think. There going to be regular updates to the CTV, so if you're tuned to the CTV, they will probably give staff reports on a routine basis to update them on what's going on with the study. So look forward to working through that. Other items of interest, the hydraulic bundle, we received bids on that on March the 7th. We'll be going to CTV next week. We were $1.2 million short of what we needed, so I have to go back and ask for additional money to fully fund that to have contractor move forward. Contractor who is currently being awarded this project with the lowest bid is Curtis Contracting. They also have the design bill funds for the DDI project and 151 roundabout. So contract is already mobilized. As soon as they finish that work, they can spot on with this hydraulic project. So it's great. We're excited about that. The last thing, talking about bundles, we've got another design build bundle that we're working on. We just had a risk meeting here. I believe it was a couple of weeks ago. It's not actually the end of February. And that project consists of the Ryle John Water Parkway intersection, 5th Street, Old Lynchburg intersection, around 53 and 20 intersection. Those roundabouts, we're looking at trying to include some additional items. If everything goes well with round 5, we want to advance the green tea that is there as part of that project. Move that with this roundabout because the Ryle John Water Parkway intersection is right down the street from that project. So we can move that and advance it and go along with this project. Right now, that project is slated to go through its process, public hearing this summer, and award, if everything goes well, in spring of 2020. That's another design build project. Great. So you guys are busy. Very, very busy. Mike, yeah.
Yeah, I just follow up, last time I think I mentioned that we were with a project selection process. There's a lot of talk around here about trying to do, work with the applications, projects, develop a project. We had, a kickoff, several localities in the northern part of the district. It's up on, projects, we're doing 8 projects in Culpeper County, Fauquier County, one's in green, and one's orange. And essentially what we've done, we've gone out, done a site visit with the locality, bringing their planners, folks, their public works department, folks maybe know where some of the utilities are, as well as folks from our engineering section, the local residency. And what we're doing, taking that information with the concept that they want to do, and we're doing both looking at like a conceptual plan and trying to work through some of the engineering issues to inform some of the planning decisions, making sure that planning goals are, grounded in something that's doable, as well as trying to write a scope narrative that travel with the project to make sure that the engineers that we're working downstream to understand what some of the planning goals were as applicable to the context, maybe something a little larger than the project itself. An effort to try and get a better application, because what we've been doing in the Culpeper district is, but define different districts to be on. So each does this a little bit different than the next, but we're similar to Culpeper project. We start with smart scale project, really developing concept plans and the estimates for all the projects coming from our localities in our district. We're moving that to revenue sharing and TAP. This is kind of our first really effort in the planning section, trying to even get it before the engineers get it, to really put that good context around the project, to make sure that the planners, again, sort of understand what some of the constraints were on the engineering side. And it's been great being out in the field. We've had a couple of different localities where, wow, it's nice to be out there to see what the engineers are saying about our project. Yeah. So it's not good to have that kind of dialogue. We're getting ready to go back to the counties with some of these projects next week, the week after. And hopefully, I think we're going to be close. Some of them have been great. We've had lots of information, flood studies, wetland studies on pieces of property that they're going to work on. So we're able to get down to brass tacks, what the issues are going to be with the project. And hopefully that will end up really making a better application that we'll get a better estimate on, and hopefully we'll be delivered on time and on budget.
Is that something that you see as being able to be reapplied in this part of the district, or are you?
Yeah, no, we've looked it up every time. I think there are various factors, here locally that they, weren't able to take us up on this year. We're intending to really go to smart scale, starting earlier than we have in the past. So we've been talking about coming out in July, August timeframe this year, to meet again with all the localities and see how we can help some of the smart scale projects. I know that some of those are being considered now here locally, and hopefully we'll be able to have strong collaboration projects to be developed. I think, again, one of the great things about this, I think, is so often when you think, when you're a planner, I've sat on many different sides of this process. When you're a planner, you're thinking about all this stuff, really high level scale. Sometimes you're not thinking about the impediments that might be in the way of individual projects. And this is a way to stress test those things and get a better understanding of how doable they really are, or maybe think of a different alignment that might be able to meet that same need and purpose.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Okay, DRPT.
I think she had to jump out, but she did say that she had an update that a reminder for her probably me that all is that the section 5303 grant applications are currently open, which means I probably need to enter some information and for them.
You can do that.
Yeah.
Any updates from Albemarle County?
I think it's some brief updates. So throughout the fiscal year, Albemarle County Transportation Planning staff have been working on these conceptual design projects to give us better projects with more public input and more accurate cost estimates. So we're wrapping up our Three Bridge Lane conceptual design project, where we got the board's approval to move ahead with planning a pilot program to turn Three Bridge Lane into a promenade. So that's very exciting. We're going to move forward with that quickly. We also just kicked off our Route 20 shared use path project today with a site visit. And later this month, we will have a stakeholder meeting where we'll get all the important folks in the room and talk through what that project might look like. We hope to wrap that up at the end of this fiscal year.
Great. So what does that mean, a bridge turned into a public?
So not Free Bridge itself. Free Bridge Lane is a narrow, underutilized roadway that just, it's about 3/4 of a mile and it goes from Garden Town Park down to Free Bridge itself.
Okay. And you're turning that road.
Into a promenade. So basically just pedestrianizing it.
Okay.
Right now it has vehicle traffic on it, but it's a little bit narrow and it has a shared use path on the west side of it that isn't well delineated from the roadway itself. So it's a little bit of a safety hazard. So what this will do is basically extend the park. Turn it into a linear park and make it a much more enjoyable space for
Yeah,
people.
that's a really good idea.
Yeah, really will bring the river along too, which is really wonderful. Can you, in the Route 20 shared use path, what are the stop and start on that?
Yep, so the northern endpoint would be the city county line. So there are bike lanes right now, on road bike lanes that end Quarry Road, which is about
That section.
that section.
I was on the northern one. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
And then going south. Yep, and then going south from the city down to where we're going to put in the roundabout at Route 20 and Route 53 or Jefferson Parkway. That project already has shared use path included in the design. So this would be connecting bike lanes and sidewalk to the shared use path that's going to go in on the southern end.
Right, thank you.
Over to the city.
So we are working, no, we're working through our non-motorized prioritization project right now. So that's looking at all of our bike ped infrastructure that we have as priorities from our 2015 bike ped plan and from our streets work plan in 2016. We have worked through the quantitative analysis with our consultant and they have handed it off to us and said, take a look at this, make sure it makes sense. So that's what we're doing right now. We're vetting all of the projects to make sure they're feasible, both construction wise and financially. And then we'll be putting together sort of our staff recommendations to roll out to stakeholders in the public before we bring it to council. Once we do get it adopted by council, then we'll be taking it to VDOT and saying, how can you guys help us get these things built?
Okay.
So that's sort of the progress of that.
That's for bike ped.
Bike ped.
Okay.
Yep. We are also, so our Safe Routes to School program is how we've been doing most of the work on our roadways in the past year in response to our expanded parent responsibility zones. We are shifting from project style work to program work now. Getting more programs in the schools for bikes and also going out to the community where kids are helping them fix their bikes. Last week, we had a mobile bike workshop. And we have a few of these set up throughout the spring. The first one was last week over here at Friendship Court. And next week, we'll be doing a larger bike repair party for all of the bikes that the city schools use. So we're rounding up all of the city schools bikes, bringing them to 3 Notch over here. And they will be there on the 28th. If you would like to come bring some tools. There'll be some free beer and lots of people who will help you figure out how to fix the bike if you don't know how.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's a fun thing that we do every spring leading up to bike to work week, bike to work month, bike to work day, bike to school day, bike to school week, all of those. What else are we doing? Dockless permits. We are revising our regulations in the city for dockless permits. We had some issues with how Vail was performing on our streets, especially with parking and safety, and they had some issues with their profitability. So they were looking for some trade-offs. We are working through that, and it's currently under review with our legal department. We're expecting that to go pretty smoothly and hopefully get them a new permit in the next month or two. That permit will be managed by our bike ped coordinator, which we're currently trying to hire. So hopefully we'll have both a new program and someone to manage it at the same time, month or so.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Good question, Peter, because the place where I usually trip up for these abandoned things, it's right around the corner here. You walk down here and you take a right on 4th, I think that's what that is.
I've seen that one a few times. Yeah.
You go around, I mean, I know stuff and then you run the corner, but actually, that went in the dark. I didn't literally slab in the dark. I do not know if there are fines or something that you have as part of your regulations to get a little better performance.
So we do actually have one built into the regulations that was there before. We just rediscovered it as we were editing the regulations. Is that if they're if they get a request to move a scooter or an e-bike and they don't do it within an hour and I get to it first, I get to charge them $100. We haven't done that yet because regulations. I'm still working that out with everybody, but I hope so. I'm actually hoping our bike coordinator can. Give them the bikers.
Maybe the bike.
All right, any updates from Cat, Williams Taylor?
I'm here. Just a couple quick ones. We have, we'll be accepting, there'll be an ordinance that will go before council that will allow us to accept $324,000 for passenger amenities that will help us do improvements that are sorely needed at a number of our bus stops. We are also in the final stages of finalizing an RFP that will allow us to hire a construction management company to help facilitate getting that money on the street and making some real efforts to improve some bus stops here in the next fiscal year. So those are big things for CAT in the next, hopefully, 90 days.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Before going goes away, do you have the right of way you need to? Is that that's still an issue that you would need?
Yeah, that's still an issue. So Supervisor McKeel has had conversations, I believe, with VDRPT. They're working through a process where they're going to help transit agencies around the state to get, I guess, 3 or 4 different shelter designs that will be acceptable by VDOT. That way we can kind of hopefully shorten the process because there's a process that VDOT goes through to accept the structure in the public right of way. Once that's done, then hopefully it moves the process around getting the right of way issues worked out so transit agencies can actually start putting in the infrastructure in place.
So it isn't private right of way that you would need 3 feet of somebody's yard overhang.
The private right of way one, those would be ones where CAT would have to work out with the owners. We're talking about in the right of way, the public right of ways that are controlled by like VDOT roads.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you, Carla.
Sure.
Todd, are you still on, Ken?
I think he had to jump off.
Okay. UVA? Anything for the group? Okay, all right, great. FHWA?
He had to jump off as well.
Okay.
Instead of jumping.
The FTA?
They were not.
Okay. CTAC committee chair?
We actually don't have anything that staff didn't already cover, so we did a good job of that, so we're good.
Thank you, it's good to see you. And then anything else from the TJPDC? Okay. Excellent. Are there any additional matters from the public? Anyone like to provide comment? Limited 3 minutes per speaker. See Mr. Krebs has his hands raised. Hands raised.
Thank you, everybody. And I'll make it very brief. I'm Peter Krebs from the Piedmont Environmental Council. First of all, terrific meeting, and what a rich packet this is. Sandy and our team did a great job preparing the Rivanna River Pedestrian Bridge Raise Grant. It's worth looking at to see quality work product. Even I was a little bit astonished at what a great looking project it is. I just wanted to quickly mention that we at PEC are very concerned about what might happen with smart scale. We encourage both Charlottesville and Albemarle County, as well as the MPO, to keep an eye on it as it changes. Certainly there are ways that smart scale can be better, but in general, smart scale has been good for our region. It's data driven, and the way that it looks at data is very compatible with both Charlottesville and Albemarle's approach to land use. So let's keep an eye on that. Hopefully it gets even better. But that's all I have for now. Thank you all for your service, and have a good evening.
Peter. Any other comments from the public? Any other questions? Okay, I think I'd love to have a motion to adjourn. All right, all in favor? Thank you, staff, for giving me preparation.